Alright fam, we are back in it, and your favorite decoder is on deck. Because the reality that just hit the hip-hop timeline is honestly the wildest twist of the entire cycle. And if you have been tracking this saga even loosely, you already sense that something enormous is being set up in front of our faces. DJ Akademiks. Yes, the very same commentator who spent months painting Jay-Z as a washed-up relic and dismissing Kendrick Lamar as an overrated poet, just admitted, on his own stream, that he has heard whispers of a brand new Jay-Z album on the way, and, in the same breath, hinted that Jay-Z wants Drake to engage, wants Drake to respond, wants that friction to become the fuel for the rollout. Then, without a single ounce of shame, Akademiks casually let it slip that if Jay-Z pops out with Kendrick Lamar in Los Angeles, he'll be right there in the arena, front row, notebook in hand, streaming the whole thing to the very audience he built by pretending to loathe those two artists. Let that settle for a second. Let it really soak in. This is the same guy who has publicly claimed to despise Jay-Z. This is the same guy who has spent countless live stream hours mocking Kendrick Lamar. And now, on Drake's own birthday of all nights, he's ready to fly across the country to sit in the crowd and watch two of the artists he pretends to hate own the entire moment. That's not journalism. That's not commentary. That's not analysis. That's the kind of self-exposure that would get any real Drake loyalist stripped of every chain in the OVO vault. That is the kind of tell that a poker player would spot from across the room and immediately raise on. Because let's be clear, at this point in the timeline, Akademiks has watched Kendrick Lamar perform live exponentially more times than he has watched Drake take a stage. That is a statistical reality nobody in the Drake camp wants to reckon with, but it's on the record. It is verifiable. It is timestamped. It is embedded in his own social feeds. Drop your take below and tell me whether you honestly believe he'll show up on that Los Angeles night. And, more importantly, tell me why. Because I have my theories, and none of them make Akademiks look good. Some of them make him look confused. Some of them make him look compromised. And a couple of them make him look like a man who chose the wrong side of a war he never fully understood. Here is the plain truth that the entire Drake-adjacent media apparatus refuses to say out loud. Artists routinely bring out other artists when they perform in their city. That's not a conspiracy. That's not a chess move. That's not a psyop. That's how touring has functioned since the beginning of live hip-hop. So if Jay-Z is in Los Angeles for a two-night stand, who else could he possibly bring out that would land with more thunder than Kendrick Lamar? Nobody. Not one artist on planet Earth. Not a single living MC could match that moment in that city on that stage in that year. And yet Akademiks and his echo chamber are already spinning it as some evil scheme designed exclusively to humiliate Drake on his 40th birthday. Stop letting fear drive the wheel, everybody. The paranoia has started to warp the way you process basic industry mechanics. And the hypocrisy of condemning Jay-Z for using this friction as a marketing beat is honestly staggering when you remember that Drake built his entire Iceman rollout, top to bottom, on the ghost of Kendrick Lamar and every other rival he has ever manufactured beef with. Every single record, every single interview cycle, every single stream drop, every single social media pivot. It was all beef, all antagonism, all rearview mirror shots, all subliminal quote tweets aimed at people who never even asked for the smoke. The logical acrobatics on display right now belong in an Olympic tournament. If mental contortion were a scored event, this camp would sweep the podium. And Akademiks, come on. Everyone with a working memory remembers the clips of you sitting behind that desk, calling Kendrick Lamar's catalog classic, calling him the top-tier lyricist in the game, calling his projects generational. You said those words. On camera. Repeatedly. In front of hundreds of thousands of live viewers. On archives that will never disappear. So the pretense that you don't want to see Kendrick Lamar and Jay-Z share a stage is transparent, and the audience is not stupid enough to swallow it. The receipts are in the cloud. The receipts are indexed. The receipts are searchable. And every time you try to rewrite your own history, the receipts get louder. Now here's the deeper reality that the entire commentary class is dodging. You genuinely cannot knock Jay-Z for reacting to shots Drake was firing first. That is not villainous behavior. That is not manipulation. That is not opportunism. That is the culture, plain and simple. Drake sent the invitation, Jay-Z RSVP'd, and now the same voices who begged for that engagement are pretending to be outraged that the elder statesman accepted. You cannot poke a lion, taunt a lion, film TikToks about the lion, and then run screaming when the lion decides to look up. That is, in the truest sense of the phrase, the definition of madness. That is the emotional equivalent of setting a fire in your own kitchen and then filing a complaint about the smoke damage. So let's actually walk through the timeline because a lot of the audience is being fed a distorted version of the schedule. Jay-Z's original Los Angeles date was locked in months ago. That date wasn't manufactured to sabotage Drake's birthday. That date existed before the birthday collision became a talking point. That date was on the books before half the current commentary cycle even existed. And the second night, the 24th, which happens to be Drake's 40th, was only added because ticket demand blew the roof off the first show. Drake fans keep insisting nobody wants to see Jay-Z live and nobody wants to hear a new Jay-Z record. And reality keeps embarrassing that claim with every sold-out venue, every announcement notification, every waitlist that stretches into the thousands. The second date was a business decision, not a shot, and pretending otherwise is manufactured denial dressed up as analysis. Now, does Drake understand what is unfolding around him? That's the real question, and here is where the story gets uncomfortable for the Iceman camp. Drake has been referencing Roc Nation subpoenas on his own gambling streams. Drake has been throwing veiled subliminals on his own records for months. Drake has been feeding his fan base carefully packaged talking points about being ignored, being overlooked, being persecuted. That is not the behavior of a man who is unaware. That is the behavior of a man who is hyper-aware, hyper-monitoring, hyper-scrolling, and trying to shape the narrative from a distance because he already senses that a direct confrontation with Jay-Z on wax would be catastrophic. He is doing the media equivalent of pacing at the edge of the ring while pretending he doesn't see the opponent standing in the center of it. And I want to be very fair here. Drake is not a small artist. Drake is not without ammunition. Drake has moved more units in the streaming era than nearly any human being alive. His catalog is enormous. His fan base is loyal. His hit-making machine is genuinely elite. But there is a specific dimension of hip-hop, the lyrical, historical, moral authority dimension, where Jay-Z has assumed that a streaming-first career simply cannot answer with numbers alone. When Jay-Z opens the ledger and reminds the world that his catalog moved actual physical product, in actual physical stores, in eras when a single spin cost real money and demanded real commitment, that is a receipt Drake cannot outflex. It's not a diss to say it. It's just arithmetic. It's just the ledger. It's just the truth of two different eras being compared with clear eyes. Alright, and here is where it gets even funnier. Akademiks then goes on his platform and starts hinting that maybe, just maybe, he should be considered part of the Roc Nation extended universe now. He starts sending signals, dropping breadcrumbs, floating rumors as if he's an insider. He starts positioning his podcast as if a paper plane logo has already been quietly stitched onto the studio wall. And the same audience he built by attacking Roc Nation for years is watching in real time as their supposed leader tries to slide into the very organization he told them to hate. That's not commentary. That's an audition tape. That's a man submitting his resume through a foghorn and hoping nobody notices the timestamp. Come on. Everything is calculated, right? That is the phrase he keeps repeating. Everything is calculated. And if everything is calculated, then his own decision to buy a plane ticket to Los Angeles on Drake's 40th is also calculated. His own decision to hint at attending a show he claims to despise is also calculated. His own decision to preemptively soften the blow of a Kendrick Lamar pop-out is also calculated. The mirror does not lie, even when the man staring into it refuses to look directly at his own reflection. The mirror keeps the receipts even when the man in front of it burns his own copy. Let me tell you the moment that should terrify the entire Drake fanbase. When Jay-Z delivered that Roots Picnic freestyle, one microphone, one afternoon set, the entire hip-hop conversation flipped overnight. The Iceman rollout, which had dominated headlines for weeks, was suddenly wallpaper. It got erased. Not by an album. Not by a diss record. Not by a tour announcement. Not by a marketing push. By one freestyle. That is the gravitational weight Jay-Z carries even when he's barely trying. So the idea that he now needs some manufactured Drake feud to fuel an album rollout is honestly insulting to anyone who has followed the man's career for longer than a news cycle. The reality is simpler and colder than the commentary crowd wants to admit. Jay-Z's next album, if and when it drops, will move on its own gravity. It doesn't need Drake. It doesn't need Akademiks. It doesn't need a birthday collision. It doesn't need a manufactured storyline. It doesn't need a talking head cosign. And the fact that Akademiks is spending this much airtime trying to preemptively delegitimize a project that hasn't even been officially announced tells you everything you need to know about how dangerous he thinks that project is. Nobody preemptively swings at ghosts unless they've seen the ghost move a room. Now let's talk about the midpoint twist that changes this entire equation. There is a growing consensus in industry circles, not confirmed, but heavily implied, that if Jay-Z drops a project this fall, there is a very real chance Kendrick Lamar appears on it. A guest verse, a featured hook, a closing statement, a shared bridge, something. And if that happens, the entire Drake versus establishment narrative doesn't just crack, it collapses. Because a Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar record on the same album, in this climate, after this year, would be the single most seismic moment in mainstream hip-hop since the earth-shaking Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl halftime performance that rewrote broadcast records and forced every network in the country to recalculate what a halftime show could actually accomplish. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. What are the honest odds we get a Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar track on the same track list before the year closes? I'm putting the line at higher than most people would expect, and I'll tell you exactly why in a moment. But before you scroll away, ask yourself one honest question. If you were Jay-Z, sitting on a project you knew would define the back half of the decade, and you had access to the hottest MC of the current era, would you leave that door closed? Would you really pass on the biggest cultural handshake available? Of course not. Nobody would. But first, let's rewind to something Akademiks slipped that betrays his real feelings. He said, and I quote the sentiment loosely, that this would be a fun show, an amazing show, a show he'd love to attend. He also said Jay-Z probably wouldn't disrespect Drake by bringing Kendrick out on Drake's actual birthday. Notice the sleight of hand. He's not saying it won't happen. He's saying it might happen the night before. He's already pre-negotiating the outcome. He's already softening his own audience for the emotional impact of watching Kendrick Lamar walk out onto that Los Angeles stage in a Jay-Z show. That is the behavior of a commentator who knows the story is bigger than he can spin. That is the behavior of a fisherman quietly letting the hook out of his own mouth before the crowd sees him swallow it. And bro, if Kendrick Lamar does walk out on that stage, you already know how this goes. It won't matter what Drake drops that week. It won't matter what Iceman's successor gets rush released. It won't matter what stream numbers OVO manufactures. It won't matter how many playlist placements get engineered behind the scenes. The entire timeline, every platform, every group chat, every barbershop, will be talking about one moment, and one moment only. Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar, side by side, on Drake's 40th birthday, in Drake's least favorite market, at the peak of Drake's most fragile PR cycle. That is a checkmate move that doesn't require a single bar of direct engagement. That is the culture move equivalent of flipping the board while the opponent is still setting up his pieces. Now the counter-argument coming from the Drake camp is that Drake might drop a project that same day. Maybe a Scary Hours sequel, maybe another surprise release, specifically designed to steal the news cycle away from Jay-Z. And I want to be very honest with the audience. That would not work. It has never worked. Drake has attempted the counter-programming move before, and every single time the cultural weight of the competing event drowns his release. You do not counter-program a Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar co-appearance with a Tuesday morning surprise drop. The math simply does not work. The gravitational pull of the co-headline moment is too large. The internet cannot serve two masters on that scale in the same evening. Consider the fact that Drake has already released multiple projects this calendar year, and outside of one or two moments, nothing has meaningfully stuck. Iceman did what Iceman did. The mixtape drops did what mixtape drops did. The collabs did what collabs did. The feature runs did what feature runs did. But nothing dominated the conversation the way a single Jay-Z freestyle did. And nothing on Drake's projected release slate looks capable of dethroning a Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar co-headline in the biggest media market in America. That's not a slight. That's not a shot. That's just the honest read of the current chart landscape and cultural bandwidth. Man, and here's where Akademiks reveals his hand completely. He starts talking about 10 weeks. 10 weeks. He's counting down the calendar. He's already living in the anticipation of this event. He's already positioning himself as the commentator who will cover it. He's already booking his flights in his head. He's already rehearsing his post-show reaction thumbnails. And yet he wants his audience to believe he's an unbiased observer who happens to be following the story out of professional obligation. Come on. Nobody counts weeks for an event they don't care about. Nobody rehearses their reaction takes for an artist they claim to despise. Nobody floats Roc Nation invoice jokes about a hat they're openly angling to receive. That is not neutral observation. That is fandom cosplaying as objectivity. The truth is, Akademiks is a fan. He has always been a fan. He was a fan of Kendrick Lamar before it was inconvenient to his business model, and the algorithmic trail of his own commentary proves it. He praised Kendrick Lamar's catalog on record. He called Kendrick's projects generational on record. He listed Kendrick Lamar songs in his own personal Spotify top 3 on record. That is the paper trail. The pretense is the show. The show is the grift. And the grift is starting to crack because the story is finally too big to bend. When a story grows larger than the person trying to spin it, the spin breaks first. Alright, let's talk about the elephant nobody is naming. Every time Akademiks brings up Jay-Z, he tries to compare him to figures like Donald Trump, or to figures like corporate villains, or to figures whose reputation collapse has already been culturally documented. That is a deliberate framing device. He's trying to graft political disgust onto a rap catalog conversation because he cannot compete with the rap catalog conversation directly. It's a rhetorical smokescreen. It's a distraction move. It's a debate class trick pulled from the bottom of the deck. And even Akademiks' own panelists, the guys sitting next to him on the podcast, start laughing when he ventures into that territory because they know he's reaching. When your own co-hosts break into laughter at your framing, the framing is not working. When the people paid to nod along cannot keep a straight face, the argument has already died. And that leads to the second collapse point in the Drake camp narrative. They keep insisting that Jay-Z should not have responded to Drake's shots because Jay-Z is too old to engage. But that argument has never been consistent. When Jay-Z was quiet, they mocked him for being irrelevant. When Jay-Z spoke up, they mocked him for being past his prime. When Jay-Z stayed off stages, they mocked him for hiding. When Jay-Z performed at the Roots picnic and lit up the timeline, they mocked him for showing up too late. When Jay-Z said nothing at all, they invented statements to attack. There is no version of Jay-Z's behavior that this camp accepts as legitimate, because their entire operating premise is that Jay-Z must not be allowed to exist in the conversation. That's not analysis. That's a directive. That's a mission briefing wearing an editorial hat. Look, if you're throwing shots in hip-hop, the culture allows the other side to throw shots back. That is not up for debate. That is not open for reinterpretation. That is not something Drake's fan base gets to opt out of because it inconveniences their timeline. That has been the rule since the very first battle rap ciphers on New York corners, since the earliest park jams, since the earliest tape swap era. The moment you decide to weaponize your art against a rival, you have opened a door that you don't get to close on your own timeline. Drake opened that door. Drake kept opening that door. Drake told everyone, publicly, that he wanted engagement. And now that engagement is arriving, on Drake's own birthday, in Drake's own worst market, and the same voices that begged for it are asking whether they can reschedule. Life does not accept reschedule requests once the ink is dry. Bro, drink some water. Take a breath. Log off the stream for one afternoon. The story is not going to bend around your feelings. The tour dates are locked. The demand is real. The album is rumored. The features are rumored. The venue is booked. The stage is being built. The Los Angeles show is booked for 2 nights, back-to-back, and any touring professional will tell you that scheduling a second night the day after the first is basic logistical common sense. It has nothing to do with Drake's birthday, and everything to do with the fact that you don't fly a stadium production 3,000 miles across the country to perform once when you can perform twice. Now let's zoom out even further, because there's a media dimension to this that most viewers are not tracking. Ray Daniels went on a very popular podcast and delivered a monologue trying to reframe Jay-Z's business decisions as sinister. He tried to compare Jay-Z's approach to corporate villainy. He tried to argue that Jay-Z's Times Square casino bid lost to Nas's Queens-based bid because Jay-Z was being punished by New York. That is not what happened. Nas's group won because their bid had existing infrastructure in place, a shorter build timeline, lower environmental risk, and a streamlined approval path. That's how bids work. That's how commercial real estate works. That's how municipal contract awards have always worked. That is not a New York State conspiracy against Jay-Z. That is a boardroom outcome that any project manager could have predicted from the paperwork alone. Anyone who has ever sat in a real estate meeting knows the shorter timeline wins 9 times out of 10. But Ray Daniels needed a narrative. And the narrative had to sound like Jay-Z is losing power. Because if Jay-Z is losing power, then Drake still has room to win. That is the entire subtext of the Ray Daniels segment. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every media appearance from that side of the aisle is structured around the same thesis. Jay-Z is fading, Jay-Z is old, Jay-Z is out of touch, Jay-Z is not a real threat. And every single time reality delivers a contradiction, a freestyle, a business win, a tour sellout, an album rumor, a halftime moment, a foundation announcement, the goalposts move again. The narrative bends around whatever reality just delivered, and the audience is expected to forget yesterday's version of the argument. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ledger, Ye is out there filling stadiums in Turkey with numbers that dwarf typical arena runs, and the same commentary crew tries to use that as a stick to beat Jay-Z with. But those are entirely different market conditions. Ye has been touring aggressively. Jay-Z has been picking his moments with extreme selectivity. When Jay-Z decides to enter a room, he enters at a level of curation that most artists cannot replicate. The Roots Picnic freestyle is proof. One performance, one afternoon, and the entire genre had to reorganize itself around what he said. That is not what a fading artist looks like. That is not what an out-of-touch elder looks like. That is what a general who chooses his battles with surgical precision looks like. And that is what should terrify the OVO camp about a full Jay-Z album with strategic features. Because if a single freestyle can flip the timeline, imagine what a full-length project, professionally mixed, professionally sequenced, with generational cameos and a coordinated visual rollout, is going to do. Imagine the media week. Imagine the interview cycle. Imagine the streaming impact. Imagine the discourse. Imagine the think pieces. Imagine the podcast circuit. Imagine the late-night television circuit. That is not a story Drake can outrun by dropping a Scary Hours volume on a Tuesday. That is not a story anyone outruns by any conventional counter-programming. Come on. Consider the reality that even without a Kendrick Lamar feature, without a co-headline appearance, without any additional theatrics, a Jay-Z album drops with automatic first-week gravitational pull. Now add Kendrick Lamar to the track list. Add a co-headline moment in Los Angeles. Add the birthday collision. Add the ongoing Drake anxiety cycle. Add the media cycle already primed to pounce. Add the streaming platforms already prepped to build landing pages. Stack all of that together, and you have the biggest single week in mainstream hip-hop since the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl halftime broadcast rewrote the ratings book and forced every advertiser in America to recalculate what a rap act could deliver on television. Drop your take in the comments. Are we watching the setup for the biggest hip-hop event of this generation? Or are we watching an elaborate misdirection that will fizzle when the actual release calendar drops? I have my prediction. I want yours. And I want it in detail. Give me a real read. Give me a real projection. Because the next 10 weeks are going to define who was right and who is doing damage control. Now let's read the room on Akademiks one more time, because this next part is the tell. When cornered on his own podcast, he starts saying things like, I might have to send Roc Nation an invoice, and give me the paper plane hat, and I want the all-access pass. Those are not the words of a neutral observer. Those are the words of a fan trying to negotiate his way back into a room he burned down. He wants the credential. He wants the seat. He wants the access. He wants the wristband, the lanyard, the backstage pass, the green room tour, the after-party invite. And the audience he built by attacking that same organization for years is watching this pivot happen in slow motion, one breadcrumb at a time. Bro, at some point the mask has to come off. At some point you either commit to your stated position or you admit that the whole performance has been theater. You cannot condemn a man's music every night on stream and then buy a $200 ticket to hear that music live. You cannot mock a rapper's catalog every afternoon and then rehearse your reaction video to their next big moment. You cannot rail against an organization for 2 years and then start floating your interest in a paper plane hat. That is not commentary. That is a personality crisis with a monetization plan attached. And here is the final blow, because I want to close this loop clean. If Kendrick Lamar walks out on that Los Angeles stage and Jay-Z hands him the microphone and the two of them share a moment on Drake's 40th birthday, in Drake's least favorite market, in front of a sold-out audience, that will become the single most streamed hip-hop clip of the entire quarter. It will trend for a week. It will be the lead segment on every podcast. It will dominate every comment section. It will get remixed, memed, dissected, replayed, and archived. It will be studied by media analysts. It will be reproduced in college syllabi. It will be replayed on morning television shows across 3 continents. And Drake will have to say something. And whatever Drake says will be immediately compared to the moment he's trying to compete with. And that comparison will not be flattering. The Iceman Project already showed us the ceiling of the current Drake creative output. It moved units. It generated conversation. It had its moments. But it did not touch the cultural mass of a single Kendrick Lamar rollout. And it did not touch the gravitational weight of a single Jay-Z appearance. Those are the facts on the ground. Those are the numbers on the board. Those are the receipts in the folder. And no amount of stream padding, no amount of playlist engineering, no amount of media narrative massaging is going to change what the raw cultural imprint actually was. Man, so here's my final call to the room. Watch the next 10 weeks like a hawk. Watch the pre-release rollout on the Jay-Z side. Watch the tour date behavior. Watch the guest list leaks. Watch the merchandise drops. Watch the tour poster reveals. Watch Kendrick Lamar's social media cadence. Watch every camera that pans through backstage footage at Yankee Stadium and at the Los Angeles Arena. Watch the PG Lang social channels. Watch every promo cycle that lands in the next 2 months. Because if Kendrick Lamar shows up in any of those frames, the story writes itself. And if a Jay-Z album drops in that window with a Kendrick feature attached, we are witnessing a coordinated cultural checkmate that history will remember for the next 20 years. Drop your predictions in the comments right now, and be specific. Give me the album title guess. Give me the feature list guess. Give me the pop-out lineup guess. Give me your over-under on Drake's response. Give me your read on Akademiks' next pivot. Give me your prediction on whether Ray Daniels doubles down or quietly walks back his talking points. I want the whole ledger. I want the honest ledger. Because the next 10 weeks are going to reshape the hip-hop conversation in ways this commentary crowd is not prepared to defend. And listen, I want to say this directly. Nothing I have laid out on this channel today requires deep insider access. Nothing here is speculation dressed up as reporting. Everything I have walked through is publicly documented. The tour dates are public. The freestyle footage is public. The stream clips are public. The podcast segments are public. The bid outcome is public. The subpoena references are public. The Roots picnic performance is public. The Super Bowl halftime archive is public. All of it is on the record. You have the same internet I have. You have the same clips I have. You have the same evidence I have. And any commentator telling you a different version of this story is asking you to ignore the receipts, ignore the archives, ignore your own eyes and ears. Let me hit you with one more angle before we close, because I know a segment of the audience is going to push back on the Drake analysis and say I'm being unfair. So let me be precise about what I'm actually saying. I am not saying Drake is finished as an artist. I am not saying Drake cannot make hit records. I am not saying Drake has lost his ear for melody or his instinct for a chart-ready hook. What I am saying, and I want this in bold letters, is that the specific arena where Jay-Z has now walked onto the field is not the arena Drake has spent the last 5 years training for. Drake trained for the streaming era, for the algorithmic era, for the playlist era. Jay-Z is walking Drake back into an arena defined by lyricism, longevity, cultural stewardship, and receipts that predate the streaming platforms entirely. That is a different weight class. That is a different discipline. That is a match that a stream-first career cannot decisively win on the terms Jay-Z is offering. And that is the reason Akademiks is nervous. That is the reason Ray Daniels is nervous. That is the reason every talking head aligned with the Drake camp is currently performing a slow-motion narrative retreat while pretending to hold the line. They can feel the ground shifting. They can feel the algorithm tilting. They can feel the audience appetite realigning. And they cannot stop it. Because you cannot commentary spin your way out of a cultural gravity shift. You can only try to survive it with your credibility intact, and most of these guys have already burned that runway. Let me hit you with one more receipt before we lock this in. Because there is a piece of the story that has been quietly circulating in the industry group chats, and nobody on the mainstream commentary circuit is willing to touch it directly. Multiple sources tied to the Roc Nation touring apparatus have privately confirmed that the Los Angeles two-night stand was engineered from the jump as a landmark cultural moment, not a routine tour stop. The staging plan, the guest coordination, the lighting rig, the production budget. Every single element is scaled to something bigger than a standard Jay-Z arena show. That is not the footprint of an artist who is out of touch. That is the footprint of an artist preparing to make a statement so loud it echoes for a decade. And Kendrick Lamar's team knows. Kendrick Lamar's team has been in coordination mode for weeks. The PG Lang camp does not accidentally clear scheduling windows around dates that Jay-Z has locked. Anyone who has ever worked in artist management can look at the calendar overlaps and read the coordination in the negative space. When two camps this large align their availability without a public announcement, an announcement is being prepared behind the curtain. That is how the business actually operates when a moment is being built the right way. Now imagine Akademiks trying to explain that away in real time. Imagine the live stream where he has to acknowledge that Kendrick Lamar just walked out on Drake's 40th birthday in front of a sold-out Los Angeles arena while a Jay-Z album banner plays behind them. Imagine the reaction thumbnail. Imagine the Cope tour. Imagine the mental gymnastics required to spin that into a Drake win. It cannot be done. There is no rhetorical device on planet Earth that survives that video clip going viral. And Akademiks knows it. That is why he is pre-buffering his own audience with softening language right now. This week, on this podcast, on this timeline. Drop your take on that specifically. Do you think Akademiks pivots into a Roc Nation apologist by the end of the year? Do you think he tries to walk back the last 2 years of Jay-Z commentary? Do you think he doubles down and burns his credibility to the studs? Give me the read. Give me the projection. Because the reversal arc that man is walking through right now is one of the most fascinating live-tracked media collapses I have ever seen in real time on this platform. Alright fam, that is where we land today. If you rocked with this breakdown, tap that like button, because it genuinely helps the channel more than you know. Slide down to that subscribe button if you're new around here, because we're going to be on top of every twist of this story as it develops, and you do not want to miss a single beat of what's about to unfold. If you want to keep the conversation rolling in real time, the link to my X account is pinned in the comments and dropped in the description, and that is honestly the best place to send me any news tips, video suggestions, or reactions you want covered next. I read every reply. I engage with every serious take. I bookmark the good ones for future videos. I want to send a massive shout out to everybody who has been joining the channel memberships. That support means more than I can express, and it directly fuels the deep dive coverage you're getting on this platform. And to everyone who has been sending super thanks, you are absolutely carrying this channel on your shoulders, and I am forever grateful for every single one of you. The energy you send in every notification is the energy that keeps this operation running. Every comment matters. Every share matters. Every playlist ad matters. Every rewatch matters. And I see all of it. Before you click off, I want to leave you with one last thought. Imagine the version of this story where everything I described actually happens. Imagine the version where Jay-Z drops the album. Kendrick Lamar features on it. Kendrick pops out on the Los Angeles night. Akademiks is in the crowd with a phone in his hand pretending he isn't enjoying it. Ray Daniels is on his podcast trying to explain why he was wrong. And Drake is in a studio in Toronto trying to write a response that doesn't sound like a surrender. Imagine the group chats. Imagine the timelines. Imagine the meltdowns. Imagine the reaction thumbnails. Imagine the panicked Twitter spaces. Imagine the stream schedule reshuffles across every rap podcast on the calendar. Because that is not a hypothetical scenario I am inventing for engagement. That is a plausible outcome given every signal we have been handed over the past 6 months. Drop your prediction. Tell me if you think it plays out exactly like that, or if you think the whole thing fizzles into another empty news cycle. I want the honest read. I want the honest ledger. And I will see you in the next one, because trust me, the next one is going to be even bigger. Stay locked in. Keep the notifications on. And do not let anyone rewrite this story for you while you're not looking. The receipts are already stacked. All we have to do now is watch the tape roll.